Welcome back. You're still watching the daily debate, and I am honored to be having with me over the phone straight away Dr. Ali Soliman, the Professor of Economics at the British University in Egypt. Thank you very much, Doctor, for being with us tonight on the daily debate.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be with you.
Anytime. First of all, Doctor, we were speaking about the Decent Life Initiative and the directives made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the past few months to be targeting millions of Egyptians and thousands of villages to be having better economic conditions for the future. How do you see this idea and the implementation of it?
Well, I'm very happy that finally the idea of creating more employment is becoming an important part of the government policy. For a long time we have assumed that employment will increase just by increasing overall investment. Of course, we need to increase overall investment, but in the meantime, we have to make sure that the investment is happening at the village level or at the small-scale industry level in order to create the most impact. It is for sure known that about 90% of employment in Egypt is creating in factories or in establishments that employ less than 5 or 10 people. So the idea of small-scale industry, we have been talking about it for a long time, but it's about time to really give it the push required. On the other hand, in Egypt, we need to emphasize 3 aspects of employment. The first aspect of employment is to train and educate the future workers, future labor force. Unfortunately, the training side has not been given enough attention in the past, and most of the education is theoretical and not practical. And we have to make sure that the employees will get, or the future employees will get the right training. So we need to emphasize more technical education. We have to give more training programs, even in factories and so on. Many of the countries in the world give tax exemptions or tax relief to factories that train future employees. For example, in Australia, they will pay the first year's salary of new workers in factories. Of course, in Egypt, because of budget limitations, we may not go that far, but we may give tax exemption or perhaps 20% or 25% of the wage bill of new created employment. Another thing that we can do is emphasize the high value workforce. Of course, we have seen in the last few years a lot of jobs have been created in transportation. Sometimes in this so-called tuk-tuk transportation, where younger kids are driving cars or tuk-tuks, delivery boys, more in restaurants and coffee shops. But we need to train also high-paid employees in technology, in IT, and in design engineering, and so on. So we have to, of course, not only uneducated workers, but also highly educated workers need to be encouraged. One aspect which we have to pay attention to is the agriculture sector. And as you said, the initiative by the president is to create highly paid jobs in villages. This can only happen if we improve the crop yield, and also if the Ministry of Agriculture provide more services in terms of educating the farmers, what is called the extension service. This is done in Europe and in America. The extension service is helping the farmer improve his productivity. In addition, we have to supply the farmers with good seeds as well as with fertilizers, insecticides, and so on. Another thing that we can also do is to help the marketing of the crops. Many farmers will spend all year or all season producing good value olives or fruits and mangoes and so on, and they don't get the right price from the traders or for the merchants that buy the crop, who exploit their need for money and immediate payment. We can do cooperative marketing, and this will help the farmers get better yield for their effort and accordingly increase their production. Another thing, we can also help in the export of these crops through different cooperative programs. Having said that, we can also look at the finance side. People in the countryside need better financing, as well as in small industries, they also require more financing. I know the central bank has adopted a program to help small and medium enterprises. He gives them better interest rate or lower interest rates, longer term finance. All of these are very good, but we have to make sure that the finance will reach to the village level or the small industry level. So we talked about training, finance, marketing. Another aspect is the improve the regulation or the regulatory environment. In many cases, the small industry suffer because they don't get the license to operate. They are bombarded by requests by the civil defense people. They want to make sure they have good firefighting equipment and a lot of requirements. We have to make special concession for small industries because once they start, they cannot afford to do all of the things that are required for them to get the license. So these are some of the ideas that can help us improve productivity and employment in the countryside and small sector industries.
Yes, Doctor, you mentioned one of those points is the investment, the foreign direct investment. How would you rate the efforts of the government in the past 8 years under the political leadership of President Al-Sisi to be attracting more foreign direct investment, specifically that His Excellency President Al-Sisi on every foreign visit, he asserts the point that Egypt is ready for more investments in the future from different countries, like the latest European tour in Germany, Serbia and France.
Yeah, exactly. I think the president is spending a very laudable effort trying to attract foreign direct investment. Unfortunately, over the last 4 or 5 years, the trend has been going down in terms of FDI, despite these efforts and despite many investment conferences that we had in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh and other places. Sometimes there are some external factors like the epidemic or the corona or the war in Ukraine and so on. But foreign direct investment is very important. It requires improving the licensing environment, the regulatory environment in Egypt. But also foreign direct investment deals mostly with large investments, large capital investments. This is required, but it will not reach the small industries that we were talking about before. So it has to go parallel, hand in hand. One hand deals with the large investments and foreign direct investment, and the other hand deals with the small industries and SMEs. I have to emphasize, however, that we have to make sure that the foreign direct investment that comes to Egypt does not kill the small industries existing. For example, we have been encouraging foreign supermarket and department stores to operate in Egypt. I will not mention names, but we have been welcoming chain stores and so on. These are required. They provide a good service. But sometimes by the presence of very large grocers or supermarkets, they also kill the small pop and mom stores in the poor areas and in the underdeveloped areas of Egypt. because you cannot compete with these large ones in terms of being able to get lower prices and also getting special discounts from the producers and so on. So we have to make sure that these people do not compete unfairly with the small enterprise. But so, as I said, it has to be a global effort in both fronts, in the large technology-oriented industries that foreigners are good at. In the meantime, we encourage the small restaurants, the grocery stores, the small workshops, the feeding industry to create jobs.
Doctor, one of the important points that you mentioned that should be implemented in order to be making the Decent Life Initiative a success for millions of Egyptians and thousands of villages across the nation is the agricultural sector. And we did see in the past 8 years, ever since 2014, that we have something like the 1.5 million Faddans initiative, a number of agricultural initiatives for the whole of Egypt. How do you see the plan going into this sector?
Of course, you have two sectors that you are dealing with. The old land, like the Delta and the Upper Egypt,
yes,
and the new land in the desert. And both of them require different strategies. But in both cases, you need to improve the services offered by the Ministry of Agriculture, especially, as I mentioned before, the extension services. You have to improve the marketing operations. Of course, you have done a lot of work in the area of transportation improvement, getting the product from the farm to the market. This is very laudable. This is very good. But in the meantime, you have to improve the cooperatives in the villages, the marketing mechanism and so on. I know there has been some successful cases of government intervention in the area of marketing, marketing of cotton, marketing of wheat, even chicken. We have a stock exchange for chicken. This is very good. But what about fruits? What about vegetables? What about local factories that makes frozen vegetables or marmalade or other agricultural manufacturing activities? All of this can be done on the level of the village and improve the production and value of the product.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the initiatives that we are having here in Egypt, one of them is the Decent Life Initiative. Doctor, when do you think we could be reaping the fruits of such an initiative, specifically that we have a number of circumstances that are going worldwide going on, like the COVID-19 pandemic and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, before we talk about the external challenges, we have also to benefit from the experience of other countries that have tried to do the same. For example, some Arab countries, for example, in Morocco, they have very good systems for product marketing on the village level. Jordan also helps the small manufacturers to export. Also, some of the Gulf states, they give subsidies to training programs. I can mention three initiatives that the government can take, which will improve tremendously the productivity of the Egyptian worker. Mm-hmm. The first one, happily, we have very strong and well-established military service. Most of the young Egyptians, they have to serve in the military from 1 year to 3 years. Why don't we benefit from this organizing setup to train people during those 3 years to gain a trade or to learn a new profession, either factory work or driving a car or basic training, accounting and bookkeeping and so on. So this is one initiative that we can do. Another initiative that can really give us a lot of money is that, as you know, Egyptians work abroad and remittances really help the balance of pay. Every year we receive now almost $30 billion
Yes.
from workers abroad. Why don't we train the Egyptians to work abroad in the professions required? As you know, you mentioned the negative external forces, but there are also positive external forces. For example, countries like Syria, Yemen, Libya, they are going into a big phase of reconstruction after the civil war and civil disturbances that we had. Why don't we train more construction workers, more people who can help in the rehabilitation of factories and so on and so forth, and train them almost in a military type way to work in these challenging countries. Also, we can train them to work in Africa in the agricultural fields or in projects, and this would gain us a lot of money also. So as we talk about negative external factors, we can also look at opportunities that we can benefit from under a very enlightened, capable, visionary civil service. As you know, we have built a new administrative capital, العاصمة الإدارية الجديدة. And this new administrative capital needs a new workforce, enlightened, well-motivated, well-paid, and these can be the spearheads of development in Egypt.
On the other hand, the economic reform program that we have witnessed here in the country in the past few years, as we recently celebrated 8 years for His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the helm, or under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, economically, how do you see the importance of implementing the economic reform program in the past years? And it could have saved us a number of hardships, especially after what happened in the world from the coronavirus pandemic and more recently the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Of course, the economic reform program was very important to create the right setup for future development.
Yes.
But if we have already achieved the major objective of economic stabilization, we need to design and implement specific programs for job creation and increase the value added by the workforce. As you know, in Egypt, we have almost 1.2 million people coming into the labor force every year. And we cannot stop at only the macro policies. We have to make specific and design programs for creating employment as the ones I mentioned. Training, new skills, finance, improving the regulatory environment, and also giving advice and extension service.
Yes, and finally, Doctor, how do you see the sustainable development goals in Egypt, specifically the SMEs and the small and medium enterprises, as Egypt and the government had a lot of efforts in the past years to be supporting the entrepreneurs?
Well, yes, I mentioned them, like the finance programs that subsidize the interest rates. But we need to do more of this, and as I said, we don't have to invent or reinvent the wheel. We have to look at the experience of other successful countries. I don't want to mention names, but even in African countries, there have been well-designed programs to help the small enterprises, the small farmer, the new graduate, new factory workers, and so on. But we are working, we are going in the right direction, but we need to improve the speed of these programs, because if we are today creating 500,000 jobs a year, we need to double that. And that's a very daunting task.
Yes, Dr. Ali Soliman, the professor of economics at the British University in Egypt. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate over the phone. And we will be heading to another report of the Daily Debate for tonight, which is, it has the significance of exports and the efforts of the government and the current cabinet under Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and the Minister of Finance Dr. Mohammed Moaid to be focusing on boosting the exports for Egypt in the near future. We will be having more details of this in the upcoming report.
Finance Minister Mohammed Moaid said that £6 billion have been allocated in the new 2022-2023 budget to support and develop exports. He added that £5 billion were also allocated to support reducing the price of electricity for the industrial sector. He said that the decision will contribute to enhancing the state's production capabilities in various sectors, achieving food security, expanding the export base, and increasing the competitive strength of Egyptian products in international markets. The minister added that 1.1 billion Egyptian pounds has been also allocated in the new budget to complete the installation of 13 industrial complexes across the nation. He pointed out that the recent adjustments in the customs tariff include reducing the import tax on more than 150 types of production requirements and inputs to stimulate the national industry. He said that £3 billion were allocated within huge financial incentives that were announced to localize the auto industry starting from the new fiscal year.
مصر دايما